Vapustuṣādibhiḥ kośairyuktaṃ yuktyavaghātataḥ Ātmānamāntaraṃ śuddhaṃ viviñcyāttaṇḍulaṃ yathā. Through discriminative self-analysis and logical thinking, one should separate the pure self from the sheaths, as one separates the rice from the husk that are covering it. In the last shloka, Acharya explained to us about the various sheaths and how the self seems to be covered by them for an ignorant person, thus leading to the false identification of the self with the Panchakoshas. In this shloka, Acharya is instructing that a seeker must learn to discriminate between the self and the non-self, and through the discriminative power know the self distinct from the five sheaths. The gross, subtle and causal bodies are inert and changeable by nature. Hence they are always distinct from the self, and the self is only a witness to all the changes occurring to these three bodies. One must clearly know that the five sheaths, though identified as the self due to ignorance, but in reality they are never permanent and they are always different from the Atman which they seem to have covered. In this verse, the connection with the sheaths and the self is seen from a practical sadhana viewpoint. It tells us how it is possible to separate the self from these sheaths which disguise it. The process is a deeply internal one, using the most refined of all the instruments of the subtle body, which is the intellect. The verse gives the assurance that with a purified intellect, one can separate the self from the sheaths. It is a rigorous analytical process requiring a very pure and sharp intellect, and supported by the declaration in the shastras, in the shrutis, of our true identity with Brahman, the Supreme Reality. When this analysis is performed with relentless precision, the self is beheld independent of the five sheaths which cover it. Avadhātataḥ tandulam, rice threshing simile. The husk of identification with the five sheaths is pounded away, and then the pure self is beheld completely free from all the upadhis which were associated with it. The process of using the sharp and purified intellect to behold the self is compared to the process of separating the husk and the bran from the rice grain, so that the pure rice is seen. This process is accomplished in the three stages: threshing, winnowing and hulling. The first stage, the grain with the husk is pounded to separate the husks. In the second stage, the husk and the rice grain mixture is separated by winnowing. This involves lifting the mixture up into the air in a slight breeze. When the mixture falls, the grain falls directly into the wicker winnow, while the light husk gets blown away by the breeze and falls outside the winnow. In the third stage, the rice grain itself has to be carefully pounded in the hulling process to remove the bran that covers it without breaking up the rice grain. This is the most delicate process. These three processes resemble the three processes which the intellect has to carry out in revealing the self. What are the three processes? Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. It is hard work for the intellect, but with adequate chitta shuddhi and chitta ekagrata, it can be achieved. The threshing, pounding, and the hulling to reveal the self. Just like the husk of the rice that seems to cover the kernel of rice and appears to be inseparable as part of the rice, the Panchakoshas that seems to veil the ever blissful self are but creations to ignorance alone. Or creations of ignorance alone. When one realizes Atman to be distinct from the sheaths, he becomes detached with them, and this detachment will surely lead to knowledge. This detachment must set in at the Mananam stage, having convinced about what he has heard in the Shravanam stage from his Shrotriya Brahmanishta Acharya. Shankara thus is instructing that the seeker should analyze and be discriminative. That is, Viveka is very much important for a seeker. Through self-analysis and knowledge, one must know that the self, which is ever blissful and immutable, can never be any of these sheaths. Just as how the rice is obtained by removing the husk, bran, etc. from the paddy, so too, by discrimination, by distinguishing the reality from the non-real, Atman from Anatman, and by removing the various impurities superimposed upon the self, one must realize the real blissful nature of the self, which seems to be veiled beneath the sheaths of ignorance. Acharya is instructing that the seeker should analyze. This is already covered. Now, on the discrimination, let's hear out what the sage, the Rishi from the Ananda Kutir has to say. Viveka dawns in a man on account of the grace of God. That means we have no control over that. Only if God's grace is there we will get grace? No. The grace can come only when one has done incessant, selfless service in previous births, with the feeling of offering everything to Lord. The door of the higher mind is flung open when there is awakening of discrimination. Discrimination also dawns through various virtuous actions done in past births, holy company or study of sacred scriptures, and actions taken up without expectation of fruits. The body, mind, senses, intellect, and the worldly phenomena are all temporary. Their value is impermanent. They are identified with the pairs of opposites. Therefore, they are unreal and not to be sought after. On the other hand, truth is timeless, causeless, enduringly blissful, one without a second, the only entity to be sought after, the only thing that can give us real happiness. The aspirant should learn to discriminate between this eternal and unchanging substratum of all objects and the ever-changing names and forms. Discriminate between, on the one side, unchanging substratum, on the other side, ever-changing names and forms. He should seriously engage himself at all times to separate the eternal unchanging self from these names and forms. Unquote. It is to be noted that through the above few lines, the sage has covered all the three yogas, karma, bhakti, jnana. Listen again and feel it. Again, coming back to these sages. 4. He says, when one sees a beautiful example, sage Shivananda Maharaj is giving, when one sees a fascinating flower or any attractive form, he should philosophize within himself. This beautiful flower will fade within a day. However beautiful it may be, it will be turned into dust tomorrow. This beautiful woman whom my eyes are seeing also will turn to dust one day. Even the mighty Himalayas, though they appear to be permanent, are sure to tumble down like a pack of cards one day. The beauty in the flower, in the feminine form, and in the icy Himalayas is only a reflection of that unchanging self within the infinite undecaying beauty of beauties. Viveka is the cornerstone of the edifice of Vedanta. It is the most important vital qualification. Vairagya, that is dispassion, comes by itself when one gets established in Viveka. Unquote. See, through the beautiful example analogies of a beautiful flower, a beautiful woman, and the mighty Himalayas, the sage draws our attention from the apparent beauty or the mightiness of these objects to the source, to the source. What is the source? Reflected consciousness. So leave them all and go and catch the source, is what he means. Thus, by negation of the physical and mental equipments, when one experiences the truth, one becomes detached from the various sheaths and realizes the real nature of Atman as different from all the layers. And this constant process of detachment from them will definitely lead a seeker to the bliss absolute, which is but the very nature of the self. The three processes in extracting the pure rice from the husk and the bran, they are equated with the three processes in the path of wisdom: Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. At the Shravanam stage, whatever you have been told till the last verse about the ephemeral, perishing nature of the Panchakoshas, and all the earlier verses again reiterating the temporary nature of the three bodies and etc. etc. When an acharya or scriptures teach you on this, Shravanam is not only the physical hearing, the reading of the strict scriptures, knowing, it is basically knowing. Shravanam, reading the scriptures or listening from a realized master or a philosophical scholar. After that, at the Mananam stage, the conviction that yes, the Panchakoshas and the three bodies, gross, subtle and causal, all of them are unreal. The only reality is me, the pure Atman. This unwavering conviction should set in the second process of Mananam. And the final process of extracting the fine, pure rice. After all the bran, all the outer layers have been removed by blowing them, by taking them to the air in the village. He is not explaining. You would know how in the village people used to do this process. And at the Nididhyasanam stage, having been convinced that the only reality is me, the pure self, at the Nididhyasana stage, all the unreal things are left behind. There are no more thoughts about the ephemeral, temporary nature of the three bodies, five koshas, etc., etc. They are all gone, finished in the Mananam stage. Nididhyasana, it is only on the Mahavakyas. Aham Brahmasmi, Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahma, I am Atma Brahma. Prajnanam Brahma, any one of them, or just the pure thought that I am the pure self. Relentlessly, continuously, without a break, without again getting to the world and becoming the slave of the impermanent worldly so-called happiness. A sincere mumukshu sadhaka should get into this continuous uninterrupted nididhyasana on his true nature, the self. Thus, in the harvest occasion, pure rice gets segregated, ready for use. Similarly, on one particular D-Day in one particular birth, you end up, your sadhana culminates in discovering you as the pure Atman within the cave of your heart. Each simple verse is a gem in itself if you are able to take up nididhyasana on the same. Hari Om.